Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2-2 3711A of the Code of Virginia, under subsection 1 for the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Johnston?
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Mr. Alcarro.
Yes. The motion passes. We are in closed session. See you on the other side.
All right.
Hello again.
Is that Dave's dog?
No, actually, I think that one of those is mine.
Oh, okay.
We have 4 19 and 20-year-olds hanging out doing a bonfire tonight.
Oh, okay.
And so this is going to excite the dogs all evening long. So I'm going to keep myself on mute as much as I can.
Hope you don't have to go out to fight a forest fire or
Me
anything.
too. I'm so on board with that.
Right.
So I'm starting my 5th hour on Zoom today.
Wow.
It's like, oh my God. You're muted, Kate.
What are the courts doing during this time?
Hi, Karen.
Exceptional question. Nobody knows. Basically, we're
Hello, how are you?
100,000 cases behind or something.
Just zooming away.
Okay, we are
Where's Katrina?
just missing Katrina.
Oh, she's down there. Oh, she's there with her. There she is.
Where's Ellen?
There she is. Okay, great.
I don't see Ellen.
Ellen's down, at least in my
Yeah,
screen. lower
she has
screen.
video blocked, I guess.
Yep. So it's 6:28, so we've got a couple
There
of
she
minutes
is.
still. Okay, hail, the gang's all here. And Mr. Oberg, given what I did last time and what I do every May is I always call it March. So today I've got May 14th in very, very large letters and numbers. So I will do my best
see
not to
how you
mess that up
do.
again. I know, it's hit or miss.
Like the best laid plans, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Well, the good news is that no one here would make fun of you if you make a mistake.
True.
Oh, yes, they would.
from my perspective, being a Seahawks fan is enough of a like a burden. We shouldn't tease you about other stuff.
Well, it's, you know, it's a curse, no doubt about it. We could have done better in our draft this year, but we'll see. You guys did very well.
We did well.
You did very well,
I take full credit for it, obviously.
of course. Ever since you've been their consultant, it's been a whole different ballgame for them. Okay, this meeting, this May 14th business meeting of the Albemarle County School Board is now in session. May we take a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Mr. Page, I jumped ahead. Mr. Page?
Yes, I have a motion. I move that the board certify by recorded vote that to the best of each board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to authorize the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Johnston?
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Alcarro.
Yes. Okay, the motion is passed. One note before we do the microphone check is I would want everybody to know that Ms. Lee will not be joining us tonight. She is still under the weather, and I hope she's listening in. Judy, we're all thinking about you. And Jennifer, I very cleverly tucked away that list you sent me. So we're going to do the microphone check by going through the school board first and then the superintendent's cabinet. Dr. Acuff.
Kate Acuff, Jack Jewett District.
Katrina, Mrs. Carlson.
Katrina Carlson, Rio District.
Ms. Osborne.
Ellen Osborne, Scottsville District.
Mr. Oberg.
Dave Oberg, Whitehall.
Mr. Page.
Graham Page, Samuel Miller.
I'm John Alcarro at large. Dr. Haas.
Pat Hawes, Superintendent.
Ms. Collins.
Debbie Collins, Deputy Superintendent.
Dr. Hairston.
Bernard Hairston, Assistant Superintendent.
Dr. Kaiser. Whoop,
You're mute.
you're muted.
Claire Kaiser, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. Dr. Diggs.
Christine Diggs, Chief Technology Officer.
And I think that is everybody. Am I missing? Oh, Dr. McLaughlin.
Hey, Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning.
Thank you. Okay, if I haven't missed
Ross?
anybody.
You have missed.
Oh, Mr. Holden, so sorry.
Ross Holden, Albemarle County School Board Attorney.
Thank you. So sorry for that.
No worries.
Okay, I will state for the record, and the minutes of this meeting should so reflect, that this meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia state law and Albemarle County ordinance, because the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum physically in a single location. The meeting is being streamed live on the Albemarle County Public Schools website, and public comment may be offered through the Zoom waiting room feature in accordance with the school board's protocol or by written submission. Next, a reminder that we will be doing all votes by roll call. And one thing that I haven't been doing as efficiently since we've been doing the virtual meetings is I'm going to ask on topics where we will be taking a vote for a motion at the beginning and a second to that motion before opening it for discussion. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Johnston?
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Alcarro.
Yes, the motion passes. Our next order of business is the approval of the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass the consent agenda. Any discussion? Ms. Johnston?
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Mr. Alcarro.
Yes,
Motion passed.
the motion passes. Thank you. Our next subject or topic is public comment. Mr. Page?
Yes. The school board invites and actively seeks the public's input in the matters relevant to school board governance and provides for time during its business meetings to hear from Albemarle County residents and community members. During public comment, we expect respectful and on-topic comments. As authorized by ordinance of the County of Albemarle, the school board will hold its meetings electronically during the COVID-19 pandemic. The school board is nevertheless committed to encouraging public comment despite its need to meet on a virtual basis. For this reason, there will be two ways for the public to provide comment. First, as always, they may be submitted to the school board clerk prior to the start of the meeting and will be disseminated to all of the school board members for review. Secondly, members of the public wishing to provide public comment during the school board's meeting may sign up online at our website by 4 p.m. the day before the meeting. The clerk will email Zoom links to the speakers on the day of the meeting so that they can log into the meeting to provide comment. Before electronic public comment commences, the vice chair will announce the order in which the speakers will comment. Public commenters will initially be admitted to a waiting room area on Zoom until it is their turn to speak. There, they'll be able to hear the meeting in progress while they wait. Each speaker's access to public comment will be activated when it is that speaker's turn to provide comment to the members of the school board. Speakers will be notified when they reach the 2-minute mark. And at the 3-minute mark, the speaker's Zoom link will be automatically deactivated. Although the school board is confident that public comment will proceed in an orderly and respectful manner, upon instruction from the chair, the clerk has the ability to disconnect a speaker who is disruptive, profane, or fails to abide by these guidelines. Speakers during the meeting or those submitting written comment should state name and address or magisterial district. Simply stating Albemarle County is not adequate. The school board will not respond to comments made during the public comment period. School board members may address comments at the end of the meeting agenda under other business. And tonight we have 5 speakers. They will speak in this order: Vernon Lighty, Murray Sokowski, whose name I butchered, Kevin Owen, Amy Gardner, and Cheryl Knight. Those are our 5 speakers for tonight. Ms. Johnson.
And may I also ask all board members to mute their microphones? That'd be great. Thank you.
Sorry, I think that was me. I realized I was off. There's like birds and stuff.
Not to worry. May I also ask all board members to mute their microphones? Mr. Lectie, go right ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Vernon Lectie. I'm a teacher at Albemarle High School, and I currently vote in the Jack Jewett District. I'm here to talk about collective bargaining. As public school teachers, my colleagues and I have been humbled by the support we received from the parents, the board, and the public during the coronavirus pandemic. We've all seen posts on social media from folks who say things like, we should pay teachers $1 million, or I didn't realize that their jobs are so hard. While we appreciate the sentiment, most teachers will tell you that they don't need $1 million. What we need is the dignity of a voice on the job. For those that are not aware, collective bargaining is simply a process of negotiation between employers and their employees. Police, firefighters, and teachers have concerns related to workload, compensation, staffing levels, and safety. We want to make sure that classrooms are not overcrowded and that emergency responders have the resources they need because our work conditions affect the vast majority of Virginians. Collective bargaining allows localities to partner up with their employees so they better understand these concerns and work together to address them. Fortunately, the General Assembly of Virginia has passed legislation that could grant Albemarle employees collective bargaining rights. The legislation empowers the localities and the school boards to give us those collective bargaining rights. This law will go into effect in May of 2021 and is now up to the school board to give the employees these rights. There is no inherent cost to collective bargaining. Giving teachers the power to negotiate a contract does not mean that the school boards or localities are forced to spend money that they don't have. Rather, collective bargaining is about working within the realm of what is possible to achieve the best possible result for everyone. Workers who are on the ground are often in the best position to identify inefficiencies and waste that they witness firsthand. Furthermore, teachers' working conditions are the students' learning conditions. We want smaller class sizes so that we can give your children more attention. We want adequate planning time so that our students can get high quality lessons. And we want a consistent discipline policy so that consequences are fair across the board and not influenced by implicit racial bias. Our contracts typically run in the ranges of 2 pages. The wording is intentionally vague and teachers feel pressure to take on extra responsibilities without additional time or additional compensation. We need clarity and we need protection. So many people in the past few weeks have expressed their respect for our teachers, firefighters, and other public sector workers who continue to deliver essential services through this pandemic. But you can't support teachers if you don't support giving us the freedom to join a union and bargain collectively, as our counterparts in the private sector can do. Our students deserve the best. This school division is stepping up to ensure our students have the support they need to finish this semester. We're not turning back on these kids in the middle of a pandemic, and we're asking that our elected leaders not turn their backs on us. I encourage the Albemarle County School Board and the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors to grant its employees the right to collectively bargain. Listen to firefighters, police, and teachers. Show us that you truly do respect our professional opinions and give us a seat at the table. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lectie. Ms. Olkowski, go right ahead.
Yes, I have a question. I know that you're waiting on a lot of things. There's a task force. I know you're waiting on probably the CDC and the state, but I'm just wondering, I've been working with HR and everybody said it's a great question, but they don't know the answer. What is going to be done for employees that are considered vulnerable or high risk? And definitely what will be done for bus drivers? Those are 2 questions I think that we could be looking into now without a whole lot of guidance from the CDC.
Ma'am, we don't engage in conversation. This is more you expressing your opinions to us, and we'll end up talking about it a little bit later.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. Did you have other things you wanted to tell us?
No, I know that I'm just concerned definitely about bus drivers and how we're going to handle that. We have a shortage of bus drivers. A lot of them are older, and it's hard getting around the fact that kids are going to only be about 2 inches from them. as they get on and off the bus. But that, so I'm sorry.
No, no, not at all. And we appreciate your comments, and we'll definitely, consider them, because we have a lot of subjects to talk about, and that those would be included in it.
Okay, sorry. This is the first school board I've attended, so I'm sorry.
I'm so glad you came. Thank you for being here. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Owen, go right ahead. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Kevin Owen. I live out in Crozet in the Whitehall district, and I have 2 children in the Brownsville Elementary School. I'd like to talk today and ask a little bit about the decision-making process on whether or not to open schools and how to do that. I'd like to strongly request that that decision is based on data, evidence, and risk, and not just fear without data. I would also like to ask that that decision is made based. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Hi, my name is Kevin Owen. I live in Crozet in the Whitehall district. Oh, I am. I'm sorry, I was streaming on a different window. Yeah, I would also like to ask that the decision to open the schools is made on a local basis. We're not Northern Virginia, we're not Richmond, it's a different situation. I know we've been closed for 2 months now. It will be 3 months by the end of the year. And I think everyone can agree it's been an awful experience for all of us. Kids have missed education. The online schooling has been good, but it's not the same thing. I'm also much more worried about the mental health impact. I know that my kids are beginning to be depressed. And if we don't open in the fall, we'll be doing an experiment on what happens if you don't let kids socialize for 9 months. That's never been done before. And these are the ages where they have to learn and the brains have to rewire and socialize with their peers and do it that way. So if we don't reopen, then I'm afraid that will be a very, very bad situation. And I mentioned data before. I know that it wasn't necessarily a popular thing to close all the schools for the whole year at the beginning when there wasn't much data. And it was probably the wise decision, but I'm a PhD scientist and I've looked at some of the data out there, and there's a couple of pieces of evidence. One is that out of the 80,000 deaths in COVID so far, there's only 4 kids in the 5 to 14 age range that have died, which implies that if we open schools, it would not be a danger to the kids. And also there's a risk of the kids coming home affecting the parents, which is a real risk. But we also have an experiment going on in Sweden where they did not close the schools and their deaths and infections were only about 1/3 higher than us. Yet in Stockholm, they have 30% immunity, and they expect by the end of the summer they'll have herd immunity. So they traded off something there. So I'd just like to ask that we use data and stuff like that. And unfortunately, as we know, if school boards can decide we'd like to open, they can be overridden by the governor. I would like to ask that the school board considers ways to get ahead of that and maybe communicate with the governor and request that it would be a local decision for the benefit of the local parents and kids, and also maybe talk to some other school boards. If you could have 10 school boards that all feel the same way, let us make the decision, not have a blanket one-size-fits-all decision, and maybe do like a newspaper editorial about that. That might be a good way to let this be a local decision, and so that we could all have some kind of agency. Because I know that some parents will leave the state if the schools don't open and they can't work. I mean, that's how I feel. If there's 6 months of, if the 6 months of no school and we can't work, it's untenable. We'll be sending the kids to go stay with grandma or something like that. It's not a good situation. But thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys, and I hope you guys come to the right decision about opening the schools in the fall.
Thank you, Mr. Owen, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Page?
Ms. Gardner, thank you for coming to speak to us today. You are on.
Good evening, members of the school board, Dr. Haas, and other central office staff personnel. My name is Amy Gertner, and I live in the Whitehall district. Thank you for your work that has gone into preparing a new budget. I know it has been very discouraging to see new programs and services you supported having to be cut. We are all concerned about meeting the needs of a growing population of students with fewer resources. Employees are disheartened that our raises are gone. Many of us have lost our second and third jobs. The financial stress of being an educator is now compounded by concerns for our students, their families, our families, and our own health. We are home with our family, and we are also supporting, encouraging, and engaging the families of our students. Matt was right. This is a marathon. We are training and preparing for the next race, and we are not to the finish line of this one. Educators have been asking questions and have many concerns. Teachers are apprehensive about signing new contracts when they do not know what they will be expected to do in order to honor their contracts. We will need to be given copies of our entire contract before signing them this year. Will educators and students be tested before returning to school to find out if we have the virus or have asymptomatic carrier? Elementary students will not keep their mask on their face or keep their hands off their face. Elementary students should not be expected to keep their hands to themselves. They are kinesthetic learners. Their county employees have underlying medical issues and care for family members who have underlying medical conditions. Do we know how many employees fall into these categories? I would like PD this summer to help me talk with my students, their parents, and my colleagues about the trauma of this pandemic. I would love more mindfulness training to help me and other educators manage stress. In my career, I've been to 3 funerals of student family members. In my first year, 7th grade brother of a student died from leukemia. 11 years ago, one of my students' mothers was diagnosed with breast cancer in October and passed away just before Mother's Day. The grade level team of teachers attended both funerals. 2 years ago, I attended the funeral of a student's grandmother. There are numerous blessings of living, teaching, and worshiping in the same community, but there are also moments when I carry the grief of a family and my neighbors close to my heart. I was the family's deacon. I took a half-a-day personal day to be with the family at the funeral. There will be many family members and students who will get sick, and some will pass away. Will there be a funeral? Will staff be able, allowed, or expected to go to funerals? Will we need to take personal days in order to attend funerals? How will the county help students and staff manage their emotions when someone passes away? I've been playing the role of a counselor, but I'm not trained to help people I love manage the layers of worries brought on by the pandemic. Educators are tired of staying at home. We miss our students, but this is still a deadly virus, and we want to know that our students and staff are safe before schools are opened. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Mrs. Knight.
This
You're
new
muted.
technology.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you for being here.
Thank you all for being here. First, I'd just like to say thank you for your work, not only during this time, but especially during this time. And I would like to reiterate what was expressed last week by a parent, underscoring the need for mental health services in place for students and for staff. I appreciate that there's going to be a focus on healthy students in place and healthy teachers. I know the task force that are moving forward are looking at all of those things. So I really appreciate that. I did want to just mention, presently I have a student who has now developed some anxiety around germs and germophobia and is unable at this point to touch paperback books or paper books. And so he is only reading digital books from a screen, which is a great way to do it, but it does just underscore the difficulties that some of our students are having. And then of course, as we return to school, we'll have to figure out how to overcome that obstacle. And I'm hoping that there's include educators from a wide spectrum office staff.
Ms. Knight,
So
I
wanted
don't
to just
know.
highlight students who do not often get the line. Yes,
We're just
I
having
can't-
trouble hearing you. We're kind of losing your signal. So if you can hear us now, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've lost her again.
I think we have.
I'm sorry. Oh. Oh. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That one,
Okay.
that we heard that sentence, yes. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So our special needs students, of course, especially for those with significant special needs who are getting community-based instruction and are often entering into our communities regularly, just problem solving on that of how we are going to, for the foreseeable future, deal with that issue. And then also another aspect of working with that student population in the hands-on nature, as well as our preschool children, just the personal care that the students will need in terms of toileting and diapering, feeding assistance. Some of the students have feeding tubes, etc., and other medical conditions. And I realize this is not just an Albemarle County concern, this is a national concern, and we need to continue to work together and to come up with plans that will ensure the safety and the well-being of all. Thank you for your hard work during this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Thank you very much for your comments. And this ends our public comment section. We thank all of the speakers, all 5 speakers, for participating tonight. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Page. And I'd like to echo that and thank Ms. Johnston for handling this very well. We're all still getting used to it. Next up is Spotlight on Education. Dr. Acuff. You're muted. Whoop.
We'll get used to this by the time we start meeting again. Thank you, Jonna. This evening, we have the privilege of celebrating the extraordinary accomplishments of 3 outstanding Albemarle High School students, Kat Ravichandran, Meena Mboti, and Isabel Pardue. Kat and Meena earned top honors at this year's Piedmont Regional Science Fair when they received grand awards. And Meena was also a grand prize winner in the state science fair competition. Isabel was chosen for the top Emily Curick Leadership Forum Scholarship this spring. All 3 students are with us today via Zoom, and I'm going to let each of them talk about their amazing research and contributions to science, our communities, and perhaps the world's health and well-being. Let me offer, though, some brief descriptions. I'm sure our accomplished guests will correct me if I'm wrong. First, Kat's research examined the effectiveness of quarantines and vaccines in controlling and combating the spread of infections. While this work began before the world heard of COVID-19, its importance to communities across the globe could not be more relevant than it is right now. Meena's research tackled another health problem. Worldwide, there are about 200 million people who suffer from dry macular degeneration, an eye condition that often leads to blindness. Until now, there has not been a treatment for this terrible disease. There may soon be as a result of Meena's research. She found evidence that a drug approved by the FDA to treat clinical depression, I'm lost here. Oh, also protects the retina and could be a treatment for macular degeneration. Take note, both of these students are sophomores. Another student who has been active on behalf of health issues dating back to her sophomore year is Isabel, who is now a senior. She is also a Piedmont Regional Science Fair champion in her own right for her research on student mental health issues. And more recently, she started her own company. She uses a portion of the profits from her business to support Region 10 in providing students with mental health services. For her courage in overcoming her own challenges, her academic success, and her passion for helping others, Isabel received the Emily Couric Leadership Forum's top award for 2020, a $50,000 scholarship. I'd like to ask each of our guests to take a minute to share some of their thoughts about their research, about what they have learned, and about their future plans. Let's start with Kat, then Mina, and then Isabel. Thank you all for making our meeting this evening so special. So first, Kat.
Kate, I don't see her on the list. Maybe we should go right to Mina.
Okay, is Mina on here? I see Isabel.
Mina is on.
Okay, Mina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Hello. Hi, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all. And,
can you put your video on, or do you not want to?
Let's see.
Should be in the lower left. There you are.
Very much. So I guess I'll just start talking about my work. So I've been researching a disease called macular degeneration. And this is a blinding condition that affects over 200 million people around the world. The vast majority of the cases, about 90%, are what's called the dry type of macular degeneration. And there's no FDA-approved treatment for this form of the disease, which often leads to irreversible blindness in people over the age of 50. They lose the ability to read, watch TV, and sometimes even see faces. This horrible disease strips patients of their most important sense, robbing them of their humanity. Dry macular degeneration causes blindness by killing cells in the center of the retina, known as the macula, effectively punching holes in patients' vision. As this disease has no treatment, I wanted to find the first therapy. Traditional drug development costs billions of dollars and over a decade of research and testing. Instead, I focused on finding a drug that's already FDA approved for another disease and testing whether it could be repurposed for this one. I discovered that fluoxetine, also known as Prozac, which is used to treat depression, could be repurposed as potentially the first treatment for dry macular degeneration. My novel repurposing method dramatically decreases the time and cost of creating a treatment. In my experiments, I tested fluoxetine in cells, retinal tissue, and a health insurance database covering 25 million patients. I found that fluoxetine was able to protect retinal cells and animal models from retinal degeneration. In addition, I performed a retrospective study in a large health insurance database and found that patients taking fluoxetine had a much lower risk of developing macular degeneration. I'm excited that my work can be translated from the lab to the patients quickly, saving millions. I'm also really excited about continuing to work on this project, and I'm aiming to launch prospective randomized clinical trials as soon as possible so that we can develop the very first treatment for this blinding disease. Thank you.
It's extraordinary. Do we want to go through, why don't we have everyone talk and then we can ask questions?
Sure. That's a good idea.
Isabel?
Hi.
Hi.
So I won the Emily Couric Leadership Scholarship, and I'm super thankful for it. It's so helpful in terms of paying for college, and a big thing that I want to study is neuroscience. So my goal right now is to major in economics and minor in neuroscience. And the reason for that is, well, there's a couple reasons actually. So I personally struggled with depression throughout high school, and that was really hard because you kind of hear about it and you hear other people talk about it, and there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding any sort of mental illness, but especially depression, and experiencing it firsthand is, well, it's different for everyone, but it was definitely life-changing, I would say. And at first I didn't want to go to see a doctor or a therapist or get any kind of treatment, but when I did, when it got to the point that I needed that so badly, it changed so much, and it honestly, it helped so much. And so after that, you know, I tried to find sources of happiness and positivity, because when you're going through something like that, it's really hard to find that anywhere you look. And so I made a phone case, and it just had positive quotes and colors on it, things like that. It was really simple. I didn't really think much of it, honestly. And a lot of people asked me if I could make them one too. And so one thing led to another, and I set up an Etsy page and an Instagram account for it, and I named it Happy Cases, with a goal to promote positivity and things like that. And now I've sold over 300 cases across the country to over 20 people in 20 different states. So I didn't think that that would be the kind of response I got. I thought it would be something really small. That was really exciting. And I kind of wanted to do more with that because of the response that I was getting. And so I took time to research different nonprofits and for mental health. And I kind of wanted to find a smaller one so that the contribution I made, it's not massive, but I wanted to have more of an impact personally and to the nonprofit in general. And so I ended up choosing Region 10, which, as you guys know, serves over 9,000 people in our community and surrounding area. And I know Albemarle has a Region 10 counselor, and I saw her one time, and I didn't even know that we had a counselor, and now I think every school does. But just that one time, it was so helpful. And to think that there's so many people who aren't able to get the help that I was able to receive, just going that one time to her helped so much. And so I wanted to do what I could to help other people that can't do that. And so that was the goal, and that's still the goal, is to provide that for other people and do what I can with it. And so those two things, the business aspect of it and then the mental health aspect, have made me want to pursue economics and neuroscience, with a goal to one day start a nonprofit. And there's an organization called the Brain and Behavior Association, and basically they award grants to scientists to work towards developing treatments for mental illnesses, which there isn't a lot of treatment for mental illnesses because it's a very gray area. And so that's kind of something I'd want to do, is work toward finding treatments for things to really help people that are struggling with any kind of mental health issue, because it really does take such a toll and affect life in such a large way. So.
Thank you, Isabel. Is this Kat Ravichandran now?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was having trouble connecting.
No, well, we're going to have each of you, you'll speak now last, and then we'll open it up for questions, but go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my project was the application of mathematical modeling to herd immunity. So pretty much I use mathematical modeling in my project, which allows me to use coding and programming to create agents to find parameters and identify emerging properties and behaviors. And this can be applied to an abundance of things, from traders' behavior during a financial crisis with the recent upshifts and downswings we see in the stock market, to what I decided to focus on, which is the spread of infectious diseases after an outbreak. And I decided to take a slightly different approach than normal mathematical models, as most of them are based on differential equations, and they require the mathematician or programmer to make assumptions on the data. And I decided to take a slightly different approach in factoring in this component of variability, which will allow the model to predict without priorly existing data, and will be able to predict novel things such as COVID-19, where nobody really knows how it's going to turn out. So more specifically in my project, I focused on herd immunity, which is the amount of a population that has to be vaccinated and or immune against a disease to protect the population as a whole. This is important not only to prevent against outbreaks, but to protect those who can't protect themselves, such as children who aren't old enough to get vaccinated, elderly who vaccinations are less effective for, cancer patients, transplant patients, or pretty much anybody with a weakened immune system. And I wanted to see how many people have to be vaccinated in order to protect these people. More specifically, I decided to focus on measles because it is the leading cause of preventable by vaccination death worldwide. And the vaccination contains a live virus, which means we know there are people with a weakened immune system who can't get it. So I coded and modified and coded and modified and ran over 500 simulations. And I was able to create a validated model that had numbers almost identical to that of real world measles examples. And from there, I was able to see two kind of major results. First one was that herd immunity to measles is nonlinear. I graphed out how many, as we increase vaccination rates, how does infection rates, what happens to the infection rates? And as vaccination rates increase, we see an exponential decrease in infections. This means that contrary to popular anti-vax belief that vaccination statuses don't matter, with an exponential decrease, we see that really every single vaccination status matters. In fact, the 2019 Brooklyn neighborhood outbreak, which had 9% vaccination rate and 650 people infected, if they'd increased to simply a third of the population being vaccinated, they could have seen an 80% decrease in infections. For reference, Charlottesville has a 96% vaccination rate, so a third of the population being vaccinated really isn't that much. My second result, which is why I set out to do this project, is how many people have to be vaccinated to ensure that we're protecting the population as a whole, as well as those with a weakened immune system who aren't lucky enough to be able to protect themselves. And I found that we may need to achieve 93% or greater vaccination rates to enable measles herd immunity. Lastly, the future applications of my model. So because in the beginning I factored in this component of variability, the model is able to predict without priorly existing data and without forcing the mathematician or programmer to make assumptions. This means that the model can predict things such as the novel COVID-19, and it can actually be directly translated to COVID-19 to work to answer questions about the efficacy of hygiene measures such as quarantining, social distancing, and the new idea of introducing a vaccine that may not be 100% effective. And outside of infectious diseases, the model can also be translated to things such as the 2020 presidential election to identify the effect of social media influence on voters. Thank you so much.
Fascinating. I am humbled by the work that you all have done. Questions?
Kat, have you tried to run any test for COVID on your mechanism to find out how many would have to be vaccinated for herd immunity for that?
Yeah, I've currently been exploring it, but there's a few things that I haven't been able to fully understand because the fear is that if they introduce a vaccine, we don't know exactly how effective that vaccine is going to be. And so the numbers vary depending on how effective this initial vaccine being released is going to be.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question.
And what you said, one other question. You said it was 93% risk, rate for measles herd immunity, right?
Yes.
Wow.
We'd expect probably a similar number for COVID. The biggest varying factors are going to be population density because the measles number is primarily in the United States. So the COVID number might vary in places that have higher population density and lower population density, and also spread rate because measles is an extremely highly infectious disease and COVID's also infectious, but it's just how those two will relate. But I would expect to see something else in the 90th percentile.
Wow. Okay, impressive work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Mina, where are you? You said you looked at a big health insurance database. I'm assuming that was all U.S. clients.
Yes, that was it covered 25 million patients in the U.S. over 10 years.
Wow.
This was a retrospective study for this disease and various analyses.
And in terms of the distribution of this disease worldwide, is it everywhere? I mean, is it?
Yes, yeah, it's common.
Not just developed countries that have.
It's not just in developed countries. It can affect people around the world. It's common over the age of 50. And, there's several risk factors that include gender, race, if you smoke or not, and several other things that sometimes people can't really control.
So what would be the contraindications though for Prozac? I mean, I don't know enough about the side effects of Prozac. I guess this is a pretty serious illness with macular degeneration.
Yeah. So I did some research on fluoxetine and Prozac. There aren't extraordinarily harmful side effects. They have the traditional things, sometimes, nausea, sometimes dizziness, but those are extraordinarily rare. And fluoxetine, which is the active ingredient in Prozac, was in my studies found to work much better against macular degeneration.
Anyone else have questions?
I have a question for Mina.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I was just wondering, I entered the science fair last year as well, and it was really hard for me to come up with an idea on something to research and study. So I was just wondering what made you choose that, because it's a very specific thing. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is a very specific thing. It all starts with research, learning about various different topics. And to me, at least, vision is one of our most important senses. And so macular degeneration is a leading cause of irreversible blindness in the US and around the world. And that's why I really wanted to study this disease. Also because it has no treatment whatsoever.
Okay. I'm just so impressed by all three of you young ladies. So just keep up the great work. All three of you are so very, very impressive.
Thank you very much.
And Isabella, I'd just like to say to you that that this board applauds your courage in dealing with your depression. We are very committed to mental health in our students and want to continue to develop the presence and the number of people who we can help within the division. We're committed to helping anybody who needs it. So thank you and congratulations for your Curic Award and for your courage.
Thank you.
And I echo Mr. Page's statement that, congratulations to all of you. Kat and Mina and winning the top awards in the local and the regional science fair. Just great work, and I'm glad you two are going to be around a little bit longer since you're going to be rising juniors, because I have a feeling we'll be hearing a lot more from you. Thank you all for coming here tonight.
Thank you very much, Kat. Yes, thanks for showcasing your work tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up is announcements. Dr. Haas.
So thank you very much. And again, I just want to applaud the work of our students. These three young people have really put a lot of work into their research, and I was really impressed with their, not only what they were able to talk about and the work that they did, but their poise on doing it all in a Zoom board meeting.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming tonight. So I saw Bernard pop up temporarily. He has an announcement whenever he comes back again. And then I've got a couple from Debbie. Thanks, Bernard.
Thank you, Dr. Haas. Good evening, school board members.
Good evening.
I'd like to introduce Karen Waters-Wicks, the coordinator of community education, as well an active member of the anti-racism policy, specifically the policy communication committee. And Karen has been charged with a directive of establishing a committee of students to serve as advisors to the school board on equity and diversity issues, as well serve as spokespersons for the division, as well leaders within their schools. Karen and this group have been diligently working for the past several months to plan their first push out event. And so I'd like to ask Karen to share with you this upcoming event, the objective of this committee, as well extend an invitation to you to participate in this upcoming event. Karen?
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Hairston. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I've been really privileged to work with a diverse group of students from all of our high schools who, as a result of the policy that you all passed on anti-racism, and as you know, one of the regulations of the policy is that we have impanel a student organization that is responsible for promoting anti-racism across the school district and with their peers. The group that we have put together consists of some of the students who were instrumental in writing the policy, as well as other students, and they range in grade from 10th to 12th. We're working on a plan to reach out to younger students so that we have a constant flow of students. One of the things that we do with each of our meetings is we spend some time unpacking the concept of being anti-racist. And we've been looking at the differences between individual, structural, and institutional racism. And as part of that conversation, the students got to talking about COVID-19, and they thought that with the information that we're now learning about the misrepresentation, or not misrepresentation, the over-representation of people of color in terms of mortality with respect to the virus, and recognizing that some of that comes from healthcare discrepancies and over-representation in essential jobs and things of that nature. The students thought that was a great illustration of institutional racism. And they thought that it would be a good idea to use this to illustrate the differences between the types of racism. And we were thinking about having a signature event. And so hence the Teen Town Hall virtual Zoom meeting was born. And we reached out to some folks with the Virginia Department of Health, as well as at UVA. And we will have Dr. Cameron Webb as our speaker, as well as Mr. Lawrence Pilkey, who is the father of one of our student leaders. Mr. Pilkey works in the ICU at Martha Jefferson. Dr. Webb is a physician and a lawyer from the University of Virginia. He's been speaking out both locally and nationally about COVID-19. And they have both generously offered to be a panel. We're fortunate that we'll have Dr. Haas giving some welcoming remarks. And the idea is to educate students on the intersection of race and COVID-19, and then also to educate them on what they can do to keep themselves as well as community members and their family members safe during this time. So we're very, very excited to be in partnership with the University of Virginia's Youth Next out of the Curry School, as well as the Equity Center on this activity. And the students asked me to please extend an invitation to you all to participate. We've created a Google form that students will be able to use to register, and then be sent a password and a Zoom link so that they can participate. Does anyone have any questions?
Will this, let's see, will this be open to the public or school board members?
Yes.
Aaron,
you will have to request an invitation and get the Zoom link sent directly to you.
Karen, I don't have a question, but I've already put it on my calendar and I'd love to get an invitation.
Fantastic. We will get one out to each of you.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'd like to have one too.
You can actually click on the link in the PowerPoint in front of you, and it will allow you to register.
Okay, doesn't look like it's working, but all right.
It's located on the announcement section of Electronic School Board.
We will also be working with our communications department to advertise this through the media and also our sources of communicating, such as Blackboard Connect with all of our families.
Oh, also wanted to just update you. The students have named themselves the Student Equity and Advisory Team, otherwise known as SEAT. And the motto that they came up with is that they want to give everyone a seat at the table. So pretty proud of them.
That's great work, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haas. Thanks
Yeah.
for your time, everybody. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Thank you.
Too.
You as well.
Got a couple of other announcements from Debbie.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Collins, Deputy Superintendent. I have two updates for you. One is we have opened our summer school registration for our high school students, just to let you know that that will continue as we have in the past. Our high schools those courses are virtual, so we have no real changes there. The first day of registration, we had more students than we've ever had before on our first day. At this point, we have 360 students registered. That registration is open until June 5th. Typically, we have about 400 students that come to high school summer school. Most of the students that have registered so far are in PE and health, which is typically our trend. And we have about 35 students registered for econ and personal finance. So just wanted to let you know, if you hear about summer school for high school, we're continuing in the fashion we've been doing for the last several years. The second item I have is just to let you know that the Return to School Task Force has convened and met twice this week. We are there's 4 areas of focus. We're looking at healthy students, healthy environments, healthy staff, and healthy instruction. There is a key central office person and a principal that are leading each of those smaller work groups. And at this point, it looks like about 12 educators on each of the work panels. So it looks at this point, we probably have over 60 educators in Albemarle County Public Schools working on this document that we will have finished by June 1st, and then we'll begin to vet with multiple groups, health advisory, teacher advisory, etc. And then we'll be bringing that to you at your June 11th meeting. And this is a guidance document that will help us make sure that we're understanding what our steps are when we return to school.
Thank you,
Dr. Haas.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. Appreciate it.
Any others, Dr. Haas?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next up, under announcement, Mr. Page.
Yes.
You have an announcement for us.
I have an announcement. Thank you, Mr. Alcaro. It is not possible today to turn to a radio or TV or website or to pick up a newspaper without reading about the very best in our country. Every day we are learning about those who at great personal risk and sacrifice are putting the interests of others ahead of their own. What would we do without them? It is one of life's great ironies that in times of tragedy, that a community best learns about those who routinely dedicate their lives to the service of others. We admire those on the front lines of our hospitals, clinics, and medical offices. We are grateful for their courage and their selfless dedication. I want to tell you about another such hero who comes from a different place. A recent NPR story was about a student in another part of the country who said about her educator, and I quote, "She wasn't just concerned about me getting good grades. She was concerned about me being a good human being in life. She would always ask me how my mom is doing because my mom was kind of sick. Things like that she didn't have to do because it wasn't school related. She built my confidence up because I was so insecure about being smart or the skills that I wanted to have or the goals that I wanted in life. I could always hear her telling me, 'You belong here,'" end of quote. The student went on to say how, in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, she reached for her phone to text a message and how she stopped in mid-sentence, realizing she would not get a reply. Her friend, the teacher, was among the hundreds of educators across this country who had lost their lives to COVID-19. Here in Albemarle County, we know about the contributions our teachers make in the classroom every day of the school year. We know about their creativity, the determination, the passion, and the joy of our educators, bringing to the lives of our children. We measure that on tests and examinations. We calculate that in our graduation rates. We celebrate that in the academic awards our students earn, and even tonight with the 3 young ladies that we heard. Less visible, but deeper in value, more life-changing is what is not captured by a number. It is revealed in the comments of the student in the NPR story, in the self-esteem, confidence, friendship, trust, and kindness she gained from an educator. As a teacher for 24 years with Albemarle County Public Schools, I had the privilege of working next to hundreds and hundreds of educators who provided these gifts to the students. Here's what one of our parents in the midst of the current COVID-19 crisis wrote on Facebook. And again, I quote, "What joy to listen to my fourth grader talk to his fabulous teacher. It is hard to tell who is more enthusiastic. I know this time away from students is soul crushing for teachers who've dedicated their lives to educating our children. Thank you all that the faculty and staff are doing to keep us connected." End of quote. This past week was Teacher Appreciation Week across our nation. And 1 week from this evening, we will be celebrating teachers who have received a Golden Apple Award for their exceptional service to students and families. In fact, the past few weeks have been a time to honor many of those who unselfishly serve our students and their families. They included Assistant Principals Day, National Library Week, Student Leadership Week, Administrative Professionals Day, National Physical Education Week, Principals Day, National Music Week, and School Nurses Day. Normally, each of these occasions would feature special programs and activities. And while the public health restrictions in place to protect us from COVID-19 make this anything but a normal time, they do not diminish the everyday accomplishments and attributes of these highly dedicated and extraordinary professionals. So in light of that, I would like to make a motion that our board expresses its deepest appreciation to our teachers, administrators, and staff for their exceptional public service and for being so important to the success of our students and families, to our school division and county, and to our future together.
Second.
Are you on mute, Mr. Alcaro?
I just took myself off of mute. I think that may have been one of our behind the scenes folks. But Mr. Page, go ahead. I'm not sure, I didn't hear the end. Did you finish?
Yes, and
Okay.
I also had.
He finished it, I seconded it.
Right.
Very good. Ms. Johnston.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Strong yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro.
Very much, yes. Thank you, Mr. Page. The motion passes. One other thing in announcements that I'd just like to mention is yesterday morning, I was surprised very pleasantly to see, I only watched 5, but I'm sure there are a lot more of them out there right now, videos of Apple Award winners from the last year. And it was just very, very heartwarming to listen to what they have chosen to do with their award money, the pride in which that they took in this. And there were 3 people who taught in our schools. One had previously taught in a Charlottesville school. There was the music director from Charlottesville High School and a teacher from Charlottesville Catholic School. If you're on YouTube at any point, look up K-12 Albemarle, and I think you'll find some of these videos. And you know, of course, Dr. Haas is our video champion, and just continuing to do a stellar job with it. But these young men and women were definitely giving them a run for the money. So, Dr. Haas, back to you. Is any superintendent business?
We did not have anything other than what's on the agenda, except I do want to give a quick shout out to Pam Lockhart and Glenetta Smith Tolliver. Today I was out visiting their meal distribution site out in Four Seasons, and they actually visit 4 different sites right there in the urban ring. And they told me that they're serving approximately 150 meals a day in their circuit that they make, and they are just wonderful, and they're doing outstanding work. So I want to give them a shout out. But we did not have anything other than the business at hand, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haas, and please give them a thank you from the school board as well. From the school board business side of things, I'd like to call on some of our members to present or give motions for the some appointments to the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee and the School Health Advisory Committee. Mr. Oberg, may we start with you?
I would like to appoint and move that the school board appoint Diane Stobel to the Long Range Planning Committee.
Do we have a second?
Advisory Committee.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay. Ms. Johnston, we have a motion and a second. Jen, you're on mute.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro.
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro, would it be faster to have all of the health advisories at once, or do you want to do it individually?
I think I'd like to do it by school board member because everybody is nominating for their particular magisterial district.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind on that.
No,
Mr. Oberg, congratulations to Ms. Sobel. And I'm sure we all look forward to seeing her on the Long Range Planning Committee. Mr. Page.
Yes. For School Advisory Health Board, I would like to nominate Gail Burt, who is from North Garden. She has 2 kids at Red Hill, or will at least in this coming session. So Gail Burt for School Advisory Board, Samuel Miller District.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to appoint Gail Hurt to the school, Burt, I beg your pardon, to the School Health Advisory Board. Ms. Johnston.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro.
Yes. The motion passes. Congratulations to Ms. Bird. Dr. Acuff.
I will have my School Health Advisory Board nominee appointee next week, next school board meeting, but I would like to appoint John C. Bruno as my Long Range Planning Advisory Committee representative. He has a degree in engineering. He's worked construction, schools, and he's currently with University of Virginia. And he has a 2-month-old who will be going to Greer Elementary School in a couple years, a few. So I move that this board accept him as my appointee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Mr. Bruno. Ms. Johnston.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro.
Yes. Congratulations. The motion passes. Mrs. Carlson.
Yes, I'd like to move that we appoint Bruce Dodson to the Long Range Planning Committee to represent the Rio seat. He's already on the Long Range Planning Committee. He also serves on the Planning Commission.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to reappoint Bruce Dodson to the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee. Ms. Johnston.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro.
Yes. Congratulations to Mr. Dodson. Are there any other nominations that we've missed so far? Okay. Thank you.
Chair, can I raise a point of personal privilege just for a second?
Please.
I just found out that if you hit the space bar, it unmutes you for as long as you hold on to the space bar.
Ah. Good to know.
Probably other people knew that, but if you don't know that, that's a because
I, for one,
let
did
go
not,
of the
but
space bar.
I, for one, did not, and I will put that to use. Thank you. Okay, next up is the adoption of the fiscal year 2020-2021 school operating fund and special revenues fund budget. I'd like to start with a motion on this, Mr. Oberg.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Albemarle County School Board adopt the fiscal year 2020/21 school board budget of $193,741,120 school fund and $17,460,067 for special revenue funds.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the fiscal year 2020-2021 school board budget. And I can verify that Mr. Oberg read the numbers. I'm not going to repeat them at this time. Any discussion?
I just want to say how grateful I am, and I'm sure the rest of the board is, for all the work that Maya and everybody at the organization worked on this. It is amazing what you guys did in the amount of time that you had. This is a process that usually, I'm sure we're starting on next year's budget already. And usually we have a year to work on this, and this crisis hit and you guys stepped up to the plate, and I'm just so impressed and grateful for what you could do.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Just, although this was not the budget that we had hoped for 3 months ago, I think that the team has done a great job in protecting our classrooms, and kudos.
I think that all of the things that were our priorities are still really within this budget. And so I also thank Maya and Rosalind and the entire staff for making sure that that happened.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say, I know that Rosalind's not with us tonight, but I suspect she's listening. So you are in our thoughts, Ms. Schmidt.
Yes, indeed. I echo that.
I also am incredibly thankful for the work that Maya has done and all the staff has done to rework the budget. I did have a question, and perhaps this would be more appropriate later, but I just wanted to throw it out there, and I should have probably asked it last week. When we are revamping the budget, have we ever considered doing like a zero-based budgeting model for departments, since we're kind of in a time of constriction with our budget? And I know Steve had mentioned that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we went through and did that with departments. And I was just wondering if that's something that had been kicked around as we do next year's budget, because as you mentioned, Jono, they're probably already starting on next year's cycle.
We actually did that for the Department of Transportation for the FY21 budget, and that's why we're showing a little bit of an increase to that, because that was one that needed to be completely revamped, and it was a pretty good exercise. So I can imagine that maybe not all at once, but we can tackle a few departments a year and do that, what we did with transportation for this process.
Yeah, that's just kind of my thought, is if we have kind of like, it's best practice to have an accountant to do accounting. What's the word I'm thinking of, Kate? What's the committee that we're on? The
Audit.
Audit. Thank you. It started with an A. I was close. Thank you, Matt. It's a good policy to do an audit every few years. I was just wondering if we had kind of a policy where we do take departments by department, so that we know that every, I don't know, decade or so, we are really accounting from the bottom up and it's a good way to find not cost savings, but to make sure that we're efficient and that we're keeping our priorities on what's important today versus, you know, a decade ago. So that's what I was curious about.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I would like to echo the thanks from the school board to Rosalind, to Maya, to everybody in the finance department, to everybody on the superintendent's cabinet, and including Dr. Haas, for all the hard work that went into recreating the 2021 budget in very, very stressful and very frustrating times. So with that, Ms. Johnston, we have a motion and we have a second. Oop. Jen, you're on, hit that space bar.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acup,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. O'Carroll.
Yes, the budget passes. Congratulations to everybody involved with getting that done. Thank you. Next up is school board retreat planning. And I'm not sure who is taking the lead on this. Is that Dr. Haas?
I've got that.
Oh, good.
Caro.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin.
All right, yep. So good evening, board members. I'm Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning for the School Division. And I'm here tonight to get some feedback from you about our 2020 school board retreat. So each year, typically in June, the board holds a day-long annual retreat at a local venue. Prior to our retreat, it's important to consider why we hold retreats in the first place. The National School Boards Association has conducted research on characteristics of effective school boards. And a yearly board retreat promotes several of those characteristics, including providing time to commit to a collective vision for the district and to set goals toward achieving that vision, providing an opportunity to focus on policies to improve student achievement, continuing to strengthen the collaboration and trust to work as a unified team, and providing an opportunity to build shared knowledge, values, and commitments. So the purpose of a board retreat is to provide the board with an extended period of dedicated work time. We know that one of the challenges of being on a public board such as this is the somewhat limited opportunities that exist for all 7 board members to work together on agenda items of their choosing for a meaningful period of time. The majority of a successful retreat is spent in time that's dedicated to your collaborative work with each other. In addition, as outlined in policies BBA and CBA, the yearly responsibilities of the school board include a self-evaluation of the board's work, as well as an annual performance evaluation of the superintendent. In past years, the board has used the annual retreat as an opportunity to accomplish both of those tasks. So this year, conducting a board retreat obviously presents some unique challenges. Goals for tonight's meeting include gathering feedback from board members about when, where, and how you would like to hold the annual retreat, and to discuss potential agenda items that are of interest for inclusion by the board. I'll discuss some options for meeting logistics and meeting agenda items tonight, and then we'll give the board time to discuss what they think will be the best plan moving forward. So there's at least 3 options for holding a retreat this year. Option 1 would be a socially distanced in-person retreat. If we hold that in phase 1, we would limit to 10 in-person participants, which would probably be the board, the clerk, the superintendent, and the chief of strategic planning, which is me. Other participants certainly could participate online, and the meeting would be open to the public online. Option 2 could be a fully online retreat. I think we've all lived through a lot of Zoom meetings lately, and if we choose that, we may want to consider a more limited format than the all-day retreat to be together on Zoom. And then option 3 would be to delay the retreat until phase 2, when perhaps we could have more live participants who could attend. Currently, the retreat is scheduled on June 5th, and we can certainly be flexible with that date. And in a moment, we'll have a little bit of time to discuss the format and the date of the retreat. So once we have the logistics decided, then we can determine the agenda for the retreat. Based on feedback from past board retreats, these events are generally most successful when staff members provide requested background material, data, and research on topics that are of interest to the board, and then step away to let the board members drive the conversation. Staff members stay on site and are prepared to offer insights and information when needed throughout the day. But this is really the school board retreat, and the agenda should largely be driven by what you see as the most important policy topics for the school division right now. So with that said, we wanted to provide a couple of suggestions to the board tonight to begin your thinking about the retreat. Possible topics for you to consider at the retreat include the board's self-evaluation and the superintendent's evaluation. Again, both of those are required by policy, so if not completed at the retreat, we would need to work that into a future meeting. In addition to that, we'll soon be entering the recovery phase of student learning due to our COVID-19 closure, and that may be a pressing issue for the board to discuss. And finally, we hope to relaunch the process of building a new division strategic plan in September. And board feedback on the direction of that plan and the planning process is really crucial. Discussions of what learning looks like as we eventually return to school could possibly have a significant impact on where we focus our efforts in our strategic plan. So these topics are simply a starting point for suggestions. And if we elect not to include them to the retreat, we can bring them back to future work sessions for the board. So tonight, I'd like to hear from the board members about your preferences. The first question we should address are the retreat logistics, the when, where, and how we would like to meet. We discussed 3 potential options, but that's certainly not an exhaustive list. And I'd like to open the floor to the board at this time for some feedback on that. So board members, any thoughts about the when, where, and how for our 2020 retreat?
I have a question for Ross on the legality of having meeting in person. Sorry, Carolina Wren. Meeting in person and then opening it to the public. How would that work with FOIA?
We are, sorry. Because of the Albemarle County ordinance, we would be able to conduct any business virtually until 6 months after the disaster ends. So we would conduct, hypothetically, we would conduct the online retreat the same way we're doing this board meeting, where folks in the public could stream it live. And I don't know if we have comment, but if that was part of it, that can be arranged as well. So any business that the school board conducts during this time can be done on a virtual basis, both under county ordinance and also guidance from the Attorney General of the state.
Ross, I specifically meant if we meet in person. I get if we all kept it online, but are there any different regulations? I know that there was some wording when I looked through it about if you meet in person, would we then be denying? How would we offer public access if we're meeting in person? Will we have like a camera on us that then is?
Technically, I can't answer the question, but yeah, I mean, if we are only allowed to have 10 people there, the rest could be zoomed in to participate in that way. And that we could do that as well. Just so you know, legally, there's no requirement for public comment, but we want to have it. We encourage that, and we will have it. And if we can't do it by having people there in the room, then it could be done virtually as well.
No, I don't need public comment. I remember at the last retreat, we had a little bit of a debate with someone who wanted to attend the retreat. And we didn't.
I think did attend during the evaluation of the school board.
Mm-hmm.
If we were talking about other certain issues, there are some things that we would have gone into, we would have allowed the public there, but there wasn't anything at that juncture as part of the school board evaluation that would have precluded public participation for listening in.
Any other thoughts on which of the 3 options to we would like to consider?
I would favor the online retreat. I would favor online. Zoom half a day.
I totally hate the concept of having a retreat by Zoom, because I love the personal contact. I love that. But from a pragmatic standpoint, that's exactly what our students are doing. So I don't think, I think we owe it to our students to do it online, to experience exactly what they're experiencing. I think it's educational for us, and I hate it because I would much rather. I'm a people person. I do better when I can really look people in the eye and make eye contact and hear their tone of voice and get their body language. But we can't do that, and we're not allowing our students to do that. So I think we ought to do it. I agree with Graham. I think we should do it online, and I think it should be a half day.
I would agree that the online retreat and half a day, but I would keep it open to having part 2 either online or with a delayed larger group. I think having all day long online, you would see people ducking under their desks probably.
I'm entering hour 7 of Zoom today. And I can tell you, my attention is drifting.
I move, or do we have to make a motion? Or we just have to tell you that
I think we just need some consensus from the board. It sounds like we might have that around a half-day Zoom meeting. Would we want to keep the June 5th date, which was our original date for the retreat?
I would be in favor of keeping the June 5th date, and on the half-day issue, I agree with Kate that we need to potentially set another date for a part 2. Because at least some of the things that I'd like to talk about would take some time, but it doesn't have to be all on the same day.
So then maybe if there's no objection from the board, I'd propose that we move forward with the plan for a half-day board retreat on June 5th, and we can kind of shift the discussion now to what maybe the topics that we want to have on there. So the ones that we have put in front of you already are the evaluations, both the board self-evaluation and the superintendent evaluation, the recovery of learning phase, and the logistics and planning behind the new strategic plan that's going to come up. But again, the board really should play a significant role in determining the agenda for this retreat. And so I guess I'd like to open it back up to the board for thoughts on that. Are these the right agenda items right now? Are there other things that you would like to get on there? And if we're going for a half day part 1, what would you like to see in part 1?
Dr. Acuff.
Last year, and perhaps even the year before that, we moved the evaluations out of the retreat, and I would be in favor of doing that. I think recovery of the learning phase and the strategic plan are the 2 more important, and I would maybe put recovery of the learning phase in the June 5th meeting and then strategic plan later, but it could be either way. I just don't want an hour and a half of learning phase and an hour and a half of strategic plan. I think we need to do a deep dive into each of these.
I agree with Kate.
I agree with Kate too. The only other thing I would want to add in, and I'm not sure what the exact title is, but at our last retreat, we had a report from Dr. Harrison and his group on the equity, ever what that had a name for. It was like the chart that showed us all of the things related to equity in the county. So I would also like to see an update on that added in.
Graham, or Mr. Page, we actually provide that during the State of the Division report. So usually we have to wait until, like even this year, we'll have to wait a little while until all the data gets ready, and then we present that in the State of the Division report, the most recent data that we have.
Okay, all right.
Other comments? Okay, a couple of things that I would throw in, and yes, there's the recovery, but I'd also like to hear an expanded version of that in terms of reopening in the fall and what at that time. And I know that Ms. Collins has got the task forces at work, and that they'll have a document by the 1st. So having that discussion might be in part 2, in addition to our June 11th meeting. But I think there are other things that we should discuss involving topics like K-Tech. And what is the view for K-Tech going into next school year? Because that is obviously, a pivotal part of our system and of our education for a lot of our students. And it's also a very hands-on program. And so, and I know that Ms. Carter was looking to expand, to full day programs there. I would like to invite her to come and talk to us as a board. It was too bad we didn't do the Zoom meeting this week instead of the joint meeting that we would have done in person on Tuesday. But I think it would be great to have her speaking to us about that, because there are a lot of moving pieces to that. And by the way, Mr. Oberg, thank you for the space bar.
So what I've heard is moving forward with part 1 on the recovery phase of student learning, bringing in the strategic plan as a second part, perhaps part that day, but also perhaps moving that into a part 2 and shifting the board and the superintendent evaluations out of the retreat for this year, and then perhaps bringing in some information at a later date around the reopening, maybe in a part 2 around the reopening in the fall, and some items on K-Tech. I think we can, if the board's in agreement with that, I think that gives us a good start to begin planning, and we can work with Mr. Alcaro, Mr. Page through the pre-agenda process to kind of fine tune that and make sure things are still going the way that the board wants them to.
Do we have any other views other than what Dr. McLaughlin just said?
I think that sounds good. I think it's a lot to get prepared by June 5th, but it'll work.
I agree with that, and I think that's a good start. And perhaps at maybe our next meeting, or we could talk about maybe some things, some items for phase 2.
Yep.
And I'd love to get phase 2 done sooner as opposed to later. We only have the one meeting in June, other than our COVID meeting. And so we might be able to put it in depending on travel schedules for folks. We're not going on our normal jaunt out to Michigan this year because of the issues surrounding COVID. So maybe we can do that sooner as opposed to later.
Yeah, so we can start. I can ask Ms. Johnston to start looking for some dates for a part 2 for that.
One other question is, what time are we thinking the half day would be?
I think we can go either. I would think either a morning or an afternoon. A 9 to 12 or a 1 to 4, something like that. But I'll leave that to the will of the board.
What's everybody's thoughts on that? I'll throw out there that I think 1 to 5 would be my preference.
So the audit committee is meeting that day at 3 o'clock. So unless I can get them to rearrange that.
How about 10 to 2?
Sure.
Bring your own lunch.
But with catered lunch, right? I mean,
that's right.
We have Grubhub coming.
Yeah, 10 to 2 with Grubhub would be nice.
Well, and we can take a break too, right? If we get going for a couple of hours, folks might need to step away for a little while, take a quick lunch break, and then we can come back and reconvene for the afternoon portion.
We can have a virtual lunch, and we'll just show a picture of a sandwich on the screen.
That's one thought.
Well, why don't we?
Virtual lunch, can we do better than a sandwich?
Do like Jono's instead of like 1 to 4. I mean, I think 4 hours. I mean, this is detailed stuff that we need to work through, and I'd rather have too much time and adjourn early than not enough.
I'm on board with that.
So, and I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what Ms. Acuff said on that time.
Patrick, you had just said, 3-hour sessions, and Jono had expanded it to like 1 to 5.
Yeah,
And I just
sure.
said I liked the extra hour. We can always, if we're exhausted, we can stop if we run out of things to talk about. Unlikely, but I'd rather have us have ample time.
Great. So the latest proposal I heard was June 5th, 10 to 2. Is that what we want to put on the books?
And with just a little bit of expansion time in that, as long as we get Ellen out so that she's got the meeting at 3 o'clock, we could budget 10 to 2:30 and leave early.
Got it.
And Ellen's tongue will be hanging out by the end of the day.
Right.
Well, board members, thank you for your time and your feedback tonight. I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to a great retreat with you in just a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Our next presentation is the Department of Technology update. Dr. Diggs.
Thank you, Jono. Good evening. I'm Christine Diggs, Chief Technology Officer, and I'm happy to be sharing our technology updates with you this evening. Tonight's presentation will highlight the current projects we have underway. Not only have we been actively supporting virtual teaching and learning, we've also been continuing to move forward with our regular project work. Joining me for this presentation are the leaders from our department who are the ones that have actively been leading this work for us. Tonight, joining me are Nita Collier, our Coordinator of Communications and Information Management, Mark Leach, our Assistant Director for Enterprise Applications, Dr. Bert Jacoby, our Coordinator for Digital Equity, and Jean Osborne, our Assistant Director for Learning Technology Integration. And we also have Robert Rajanis, our Assistant Director for Infrastructure and Support Services, and Howard Hottinger, our Assistant Director for Technology Support Services, who are also available to answer any questions related to their areas. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Nita Collier, who will share highlights about our current projects. Nita?
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. One of my responsibilities with the Department of Technology is to keep our current projects moving to make sure we meet milestones and important deadlines. I also work to make sure we have relationships and partnerships with the other departments throughout our school division. Our Schoology implementation is an example of that exceptional partnership with student learning. Schoology is our learning management system and has been a crucial tool to meet the needs of teachers and students during this time of extended closure. We are also continuing our web content project. We have partnered with the communications department and Final Site to develop a new and improved, more streamlined web presence for all of our stakeholders. We have created a steering committee that has informed much of the work. That committee is composed of central office leaders, a principal and instructional coach, LTIs, and a parent. You will learn more about this as we near the announcement of the new website in August. Robert Rajanis and his team of engineers have continued the large project of making sure our aging servers are replaced to support our extensive array of digital services. Howard Hottinger and his team of technology support specialists are in the process of receiving new student laptops to be deployed this fall to our rising 3rd graders, 6th graders, and 9th graders. They have also been working tirelessly to make sure families have working technology through our Broken Laptop Exchange program during the extended closure. Finally, that leads right into the topic of digital equity. Mark Leach is going to speak to you next about what Albemarle County Public Schools is doing to support digital equity across our learning community. Mark?
Thank you, Nita. First, I would like to thank the board for the investments you've made in our division's one-to-one initiative, improved internet access, and new online learning platforms. These investments have allowed us to meet significant challenges to providing continuity of learning during this unusual time. While the division has done a great job of providing our students with access to personal learning devices, and there has been much attention paid to ensuring that students have broadband internet access at school, the past 2 months have shown us that without the additional step of ensuring that all students have reliable access to the internet at home, barriers to realizing the goal of providing anytime, anywhere access to learning will remain. I would like to share with you some data that the division collected at the beginning of the school closures that illustrates where these barriers still exist. As part of the Check and Connect program, teachers and other school staff asked students and their families whether or not they had internet access at home. What you are seeing represents information about those students who reported having no internet access at home. The bar graph in the upper left represents the number of students in each school who reported not having internet access at home. The same data is also broken down by grade level and ethnicity and race in the lower left corner. The map on the right represents each of the 685 students by home address. The larger circles indicate multiple students living at the same address. The data shows that even within our urban ring, where a variety of broadband internet access choices exist, there are significant numbers of students who reported not having internet access in their home. 2 of the 3 elementary schools with the most students reporting a lack of internet access, Greer and Woodbrook, are in our urban ring. The data also shows that we have significant numbers of students in our rural, southern, and western areas who have reported not having internet access. Our 2 smallest schools, Scottsville and Red Hill, reported the 2nd and 5th most students lacking internet access among all elementary schools. Looking at the map reinforces the conclusion that our students living in the urban ring and the western and southern ends of our county represent the largest portion of our students with this challenge. When we start looking at the data through the lens of race and ethnicity, we can easily see that our Hispanic Latino students are disproportionately represented in the group of students who reported not having internet access. While Hispanic Latino students make up only 14% of our student population, they make up almost 40% of the reporting students. One thing that isn't shown graphically here, but is helpful to understanding why our Hispanic Latino student population is overly represented in this data, is looking at our economically disadvantaged statistics. Overall, 73% of our Hispanic Latino students were classified as economically disadvantaged on our most recent state report. 542 of the 685 students reporting that they had no internet access, 79%, were classified as economically disadvantaged on that same report. This most likely doesn't come as any surprise, but it does illustrate that internet access is closely related to socioeconomic status. Lastly, I would like to mention that the graphical representation of this data was put together by Sarah Dusenberry, our data and reporting specialist, using our new data analysis and reporting application, Power BI. Our team looks forward to providing more data in this format in the coming months to help the board, division staff, and school administrators to best use data to inform decision-making. The data collection was facilitated by Bert Jacoby, our coordinator of digital equity. Bert is now going to share with you what the division is doing with this data to improve students' access to learning.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. After administrators submitted the roughly 700 names of staff and students who reported that they had no internet access, we first mailed hotspots to staff members and then used a lottery system to select the secondary students who would be mailed a hotspot. We actually had enough inventory to provide hotspots to all high school students who indicated to their administrators that they would use it, including inner ring and rural households. We used maps provided by cell phone providers to estimate which carrier would work best at each home. Once staff and students received their hotspots, we asked them to complete an internet speed test paired with a mapping tool so that we could get verified data on their internet speeds, rather than relying on a third party that might inflate speed and coverage information to bolster sales. In order to make this information useful as we plan to distribute hotspots to students in the future post-pandemic, I reached out to Chris Biernan, a teacher at Albemarle High School, to see if there was a way that ArcGIS could make the data more easily digestible. Chris and Heather Wall, a senior taking GIS 2 at Albemarle High School, will speak to their involvement in the project now.
Albemarle County Public Schools challenge understanding the extent of student broadband access and hotspot distribution served as an authentic service learning opportunity for my student, Heather Wall. Working as a First Among Equals team, Bert, myself, and Heather we have collaboratively planned and are creating an accurate hotspot by carrier coverage map for all of Albemarle County Public Schools stakeholders. Heather's ability to troubleshoot and independently problem solve has allowed us to bring multiple moving pieces together quickly, accurately, and efficiently. Quite frankly, she's a rock star.
So to determine the best and worst carriers out of the point data Mr. Jacoby provided, I created a tessellation of 5 square mile squares that spanned Albemarle County. Next, I did 2 joins to figure out the best and worst upload and download speeds for the out of the point data provided in each of the squares that I created. Based off the point, then I symbolized each section with the appropriate carrier based on their logos. So the red represents Verizon, pink T-Mobile, etc.
Thank you, Chris and Heather. Working with you on this project has been a great experience, which will prove valuable for many ACPS students as we promote digital equity through increased internet access. For the board members, the work that Heather's referring to is shown in the picture on the left side of the screen, with the grid representing the tessellations and the different colored boxes being the different carriers and the best signal there. Our efforts to provide hotspots and map internet speeds has also caught the attention of local government, and our department has worked to support their efforts to measure broadband speeds throughout the county. As a result of the partnership, we have teamed up with local government to participate in the Global Cities Teams Challenge, a panel that looks to address digital equity issues nationwide. Now I'd like to turn it over to Gina Osborne, the Assistant Director of Learning Technologies.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As you can imagine, this is an incredible time to be involved with educational technology. I'd like to share with you a small handful of the many stories that have come out of our classrooms over the past few weeks. And in addition to these short stories, I'll share some of the strategies of support provided by the learning technology integrators and some of the existing digital citizenship supports that I believe are really paying off during this unique situation. It goes without saying that our teachers are the true heroes here. They've been masterful in their ability to leverage the technology tools at their disposal and provide continuity to our families. It's teachers like Reva Allen and Kristen Fayard from Scottsville. They jumped right into Seesaw. It's a new blended learning platform and portfolio tool that we've brought in for elementary schools. They simultaneously wrapped around their students without a connection to the internet. They advocated early for these students, and within days, they had high quality activities ready to go, including hard copy assignments in the mail, as well as a concise list of students who needed devices. Julie Heffron, a chemistry teacher at Albemarle High School, midway through the year, she started working twice a week with our learning technology integrator. And she worked to build coursework into Schoology. Julie represents one of many teachers who are new to technology. Julie saw the value of using Schoology's structure to meet her students' diverse needs. Because of this effort, she was well prepared for our transition to virtual learning. Teachers like Megan Copley, a counselor at Hollymead, she's gone above and beyond to create a sense of consistency and support for the social and emotional well-being of her students. In partnership with specialists, she created a Bitmoji and an interactive world within Seesaw to leverage levity and hyperlinks to engage her students. Finally, Dana Keck, a teacher from Stone Robinson, has daily read-alouds to her kids. She's hatched baby chicks, filmed their growth, and shared this as a learning experience for her students. I've been told that Dana finds creative ways to make sure these experiences are shared with every single student. Consistently, the LTIs have shared with me how ACPS teachers have squared their shoulders to the challenges presented by COVID-19, whether it's teachers driving to hotspots for meetings, bundling curriculum onto flash drives, leaving packets on the doorsteps of households, or reading bedtime stories. Like I've said, teachers are truly the heroes here. With regard to the strategies used by the learning technology team, the LTIs have developed PD for Seesaw and Schoology. They've acted as essential thought partners as teachers and administrators for teachers and administrators, and they've worked to identify the very best way to provide virtual instruction. Our LTI, Brian Squires, worked closely with Mary Hepner at Crozet Elementary to help deliver student broadcasts via Zoom. Adam Seipel, our LTI at Albemarle High School, worked closely with Dara Bonham to quickly provide access to student work via public-facing digital folders in the days following March 13th. Charlie Nolan and Lucy Spencer, as you see pictured here, developed a powerful tool. And it's a tool that identifies 4 levels of access and the specific platforms teachers should consider when planning instruction. With tools like this, the LTIs have been well positioned to ensure equity and continuity. To further support our teachers, the learning technology team has provided virtual office hours, attended countless PLC meetings, held PD sessions over Zoom, checked in on teachers by virtually walking their school, reviewing school directories and making sure each teacher's been checked on. They've also worked directly with our families. Finally, I do want to highlight the culture of digital citizenship that has been present in our school division prior to the onset of COVID-19. It takes time for children to learn the safe and holistic use of technology. I believe wholeheartedly that both the family field guide pictured here and the countless hours of digital citizenship instruction provided in our schools has prepared our students for learning at home. I want to thank our principals, teachers, and most notably our librarians for partnering with us as stewards of our digital citizenship culture and curriculum. Thank you again for the opportunity to share this information about our teachers and our LTIs.
Thank you, Jean and Bert.
Yes.
And Nita and Mark and Chris and Heather. I'd really like to thank this group for their work and their leadership. And now we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the board?
Yes.
I have one question on the data map. It looked like some of the circles were outside of Albemarle County, like in either Fluvanna or Louisa. And is that true?
Yes, and those could represent students who are attending by either permission or as tuition payers.
Okay. All right, yeah. Because there is a cluster just south of Gordonsville and then another one at Lake Monticello. So, all right.
I'd just like to say that with all due respect to John's description of Heather, and I'm not leaving anything out, I think you're all rock stars. And with Jean's example of Mary Hepner at Crozet, Mary happens to be a neighbor of mine. And when I saw her very first broadcast of the Crozet News, I had to call her and just tell her what a great job that she had done with that. And she couldn't stop singing the praises of your department and everybody in it. And so that rock star comment is not unjustified, and it's not hyperbole. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment. I mean, I think you all have done terrific work. I mean, I'm very impressed. You've made it possible for our students and teachers to actually function. But I think it sounds to me that by having so many of our teachers sort of thrown into the, to see if they could swim with this, that this is going to have long lasting positive results even beyond the COVID crisis. And I think that's one happy outcome. I do have a question in terms of technology. Are we doing anything with respect to the pre-K kids? Pre-K students. I know we don't have devices below kindergarten.
Right. Their program sponsor would provide devices. But Jean, Can you speak at all to how your LTIs might interact with them in the schools?
Yes, so our learning technology integrators do not provide a lot of direct support to preschool teachers. We've been brought in occasionally, but the emphasis has mostly been on the K2 integration with the iPads and Seesaw. So I can't quite speak to the support we've provided preschool.
I mean, and this is not for tonight, but at some point we've seen now Schoology and Seesaw talked about, and I really have no idea what that looks like as a practical matter. Maybe Mr. Alcaro, we can build it into one of our school board meetings down the line.
Makes sense. Yes.
I'm familiar with Seesaw. Accidentally posted a video, me in the background, had a little freak out.
And I don't see Debbie on. I was waiting for her to pop up, but she and I have had a couple conversations about pre-K, and most of the emphasis for pre-K students has been around socializing with their teacher and with other classmates. So they do things like show and tell and morning meetings, things like that. So I will follow up with Ms. Collins, and we'll write a response to Kate's question because it's a good question.
Dr. Hoss, that is correct. The family support workers are working with them more on a one-to-one basis, and as is the teachers. The skills that they're developing, alphabet and numbers and some efficiencies around skills are what they're working on. And they do have some devices that they've deployed, but that is on a as requested by parents.
Other questions? Okay, Dr. Diggs and to the entire team, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for what you do, for our students and our teachers every day. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share.
You bet. Absolutely. Okay, next up is the Virginia Board of Education's Model Guidance for Preventative Code of Conduct. And I want to introduce Dr. King for this. And I must admit to you, Dr. King, that I did not finish that entire piece that you sent us. I'll work on it. Dr. King, you need to unmute your phone, your mic.
All right, how's that?
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Good evening, board members, and I would like to thank you all for this opportunity. Tonight, what I'd like to do is really just two things briefly. I'd like to really just try to give you an overview of kind of what the Model Guidance for Positive and Preventive Code of Conduct policy is all about. We are at the beginning of our work in this regard. And so I'd like to share with you a little bit about what it means and talk just a bit about what it will mean in terms of how it will impact how we work with students around behavior as a school division going forward. So the model guidance is the Virginia Board of Education's most recent revision of its student conduct policy guidelines. These guidelines were initially developed in 1994 in response to a requirement established by the General Assembly for the state board. This revision was developed by a group of diverse educators from across the Commonwealth of Virginia, working in various focus groups. That work began in 2017 and concluded early in 2019. Beginning at the start of next school year, the 2021 school year, all schools across the Commonwealth will be required to adopt and revise their regulations on codes of conduct that are consistent with, but may be more stringent than these guidelines. So what are the key components of the model guidance? It does many things. And some of the things that I would like to point out to you is that, number one, it uses language that describes students' behavior with a developmental lens as opposed to language that looks at behavior from a criminal lens. And I'll be able to provide you with just a few quick examples of that before we're done tonight. Another thing that's really exciting for those of us who work as school administrators is that it will eliminate the infamous D codes of disruptive, disrespectful, defiant, disorderly. Research out there is pretty clear that these codes present particular issues. They are infamously and tend to account for, in many respects, nearly 60% of student suspensions, and that number is sometimes even higher as we look at outcomes for students who are divergent community. So we're really excited about the elimination of those codes. The model guidance also defines the role and responsibilities of various stakeholders who work in school very definitively, and those roles include defining the role of the principal, all the way down to the role that school nurses would play in developing a safe, supportive, and effective school environment. The model guidance provides a graduated system of equitable responses to discipline incidents, and we're going to talk just a little bit about that in a little bit of detail down the road. It also categorizes student behavior so adults can respond more appropriately to students' developmental needs and do that in an equitable manner. And finally, it defines and encourages community partnerships to improve school climate and the conditions for learning in our schools. So I mentioned that the model guidance categorizes student behavior. So one of the things that you're going to learn is that the model guidance creates 5 categories of behavior. And as you can see, these categories are very broad. And what I've done here is I'm going to share each one of them with you and give you just a couple of examples. So for instance, category A would be behaviors that impede academic progress. And some examples of that might be interfering with learning in the classroom, tardiness school. If you just start with that first one, interfering with learning in the classroom, you can see that would be an infraction there that I would suggest replace something like disruptive. And as you can see right off the bat, more descriptive because it speaks specifically to what was going on, as opposed to this kind of broad nebulous notion of disrupting class. But that's just one example. Category B would be behaviors related to school operations. These might be dress code violations or unauthorized use of school electronic or other equipment. Category C would be behaviors that create negative relationships, failure to respond to the directives of staff members or their questions, and speaking to another student in an uncivil or discourteous manner. Category D is behaviors that create a safety concern. Examples there might be leaving school grounds. You can imagine how that would create a safety concern for a student, and property without force. And then finally, category E, behaviors that endanger self or others. Now, in addition to creating those categories, all of the behaviors in the model guidance are also suggested levels of administrative response. And this is where it does become a bit prescriptive for schools. And we think it actually is pretty important because it does establish some pretty strict parameters in terms of infractions, wherein school divisions will have the authority to impose exclusionary consequences, including suspension, and those that certainly will not warrant it. And as you can, that's new for school divisions, the Commonwealth. So a level 1 behavior response, I should say administrative response to behavior, administrator obviously be intended to prevent the behavior from recurring, but also keeps the child in school. And so some examples of that would be reteaching or modeling of desired behavior, or having the student go on or work with a staff member on a behavior chart. Level 2 administrative response to behavior would be actions that are intended to prevent the behavior again, but also keep the student in school. But this time, it may become necessary, and school divisions would be authorized to remove a student from a classroom, but again, not necessarily remove them from school. So some of those kinds of responses might be mediation or conflict resolution, or referral to support services, referral to a counselor, or maybe a behavioral specialist that's working in a school community. Level 3 behaviors, and things begin to ratchet up here. These are behaviors, responses that would be intended to address behavior that are chronic in nature, and again create safety concerns. And so you do begin to see the availability of exclusionary responses like detention and short-term suspension. These, of course, would be more serious behaviors that would be a concern there. Level 4 are behaviors that may result in short-term out of school suspension, and in some instances might end up with the reporting of that incident to the superintendent or the superintendent's designee, that being myself. And some of the responses that administrators might use there might be, again, long-term revocation of privileges or referral of a student to my office for a hearing in response to the behavior. And then level 5 behaviors, these are, of course, these would be the responses that administrators would engage when students have engaged in the most serious kinds of behavior. In almost every sense, in almost every situation, those behaviors would require a referral to the superintendent or designee, and would expose the student to the possibility of long-term suspension, and even in most extreme cases, the possibility of expulsion. So how will disciplinary practices change as a result of the model guidance? And what will it mean? What will be different about the way our administrators will operate? I just wanted to pull out a few specific things that I thought were important to mention here. The first one is that the model guidance is going to encourage administrators to systemize the use of the restorative questioning. This is something that's near and dear to us here in Albemarle County Public Schools. We use and have used restorative questioning for some time. I think we may have the only superintendent in the Commonwealth who walks around with a pocket full of restorative questioning cards to pass out to staff members. And so Dr. Haas will be excited about this. But what this does is it asks administrators to think about the student's behavior and talk with the student about the behavior that they've engaged in very specific ways, to think really about not just what happened, but what the student thought about what happened, whether or not the student understands who it is that was impacted by that behavior, and how that student might think about making the thing right that is behavior impacted. So for instance, what would happen in this scenario is a kid, whereas in the past, a kid might come to the office and the administrator might simply take what the parent, what the teacher said in the referral in terms of what happened, and then just say to the kid what happened. This would look at having a more deep conversation with the student and asking the student to think really deeply about kind of the impact of their behavior. Going forward, one of the reasons that we want to look at these restorative practices is because we believe it's going to provide us with an opportunity to student behaviors with social emotional skills. Things that's critical in the model guidance is the recognition that student behavior is often the result of a student not being well prepared to address and operate operate properly as it relates to some emotional skills. And so we would want to speak with kids and make some determinations about which ones of these social emotional skills a student's behavior indicates some need for improvement in, so that we could have that be a part of our response to that student's behavior. So once an administrator, thinking through how the model guidance would ask us to operate, once an administrator thinks about what's going on with the kid, in the past, most often the way we've responded to student behavior has been with sanctions, all right? And sanctions being, another word for them being consequences, class removal, loss of privileges, short-term and even long-term suspensions. The model guidance is thinking restoratively, as well as thinking about social emotional skills. The hope with the model guidance is that goal, in addition, or rather than simply responding to students' behavior with sanctions, we'll now be in a position to respond to that behavior with instructional supports, behavioral support, sanctions, or some combination of those three. And what that does is it provides an opportunity for administrators to respond in a more robust way to a student's behavior. So rather than simply moving a student out of a classroom, but that student's behavior is not where we want it to be, it would give us the opportunity to think about how we might provide the student with direct support around improving that behavior, provide that student with precision in how to improve that behavior. This is particularly exciting for us because in Albemarle County Public Schools, we feel like with some of the work that we've done in years past, we are in a particularly positive position as it relates to doing this. This is going to be one of the places where our work around STEP, or short-term educational program, is going to be particularly useful and particularly helpful. So we will already have in place a model, a resource that will provide us with the space where we can provide that kind of instructional support and behavioral support, rather than simply being in a position to have to use a sanction or a significant sanction for a student. So that's just my brief overview of kind of what we're going to be doing relative to the model guidance. There are some local decision-making and implementation steps that we'll be working through over the next month or so. While each county is required to adopt regulations related to the model guidance, we do have some decisions that we can make. So for instance, with the leveled administrative responses, school divisions can determine that they would like those administrative responses have already been leveled by the folks who did the work relative to the model guidance. But school divisions can determine that they'd like to shift some of those levels, move some behaviors up or move some behaviors down. And so one of the things that we'll be doing as a division, we'll have a team will be in place that will review and revise those leveled administrative responses. In addition, there'll be a team or a group of educators that will work to review and revise the assigned levels of responses. Then we'll also need to think about the means by which teachers and staff will report student discipline issues to school administrators. So obviously, as we move to this new program, our traditional behavioral referral process or behavioral referral document will no longer be useful. So we'll be needing to think about how we will address that as an issue. That's another place where the division, we feel like we also have some of that work already done. A couple of years ago, Mark Leach and I worked to develop an electronic disciplinary referral model that we feel like is going to be useful for this process, but we'll think through that as well. And then finally, we'll need to redesign the ACPS behavior management handbook so that it now reflects the model guidance. One thing that I do need to share that I missed earlier is one portion of the model guidance that's still a bit in the future is the implementation of the SBAR system. In the past, and actually currently, At the end of each year, we report discipline data to the state through a process that's called the Discipline, Crime, and Violence Report. That system is going away. It had been scheduled to go away after this year's reporting, but as the result of the COVID-19 changes, the state has put that change off for a year. So we will have one more year of working with the Discipline and Violence Report, and then at some point going into the following school year, we will begin to use the new SBAR system. Once that system is made available, it hadn't been made public yet. Once it's made available, I'll be glad to come back and share with the board what it's going to look like for us going forward. All right. And so the final thing that I'd like to do is share some data about suspensions from last school year or the current school year. Dr. Haas asked me to share this data. The first slide here, obviously, is total out-of-school suspensions. I would note that this data reflects out-of-school suspensions from August to February, obviously, so that the numbers are comparative. So from August to February last year, we had a total of 401 out-of-school suspensions. From August to February this year, we reduced that number by 100 suspensions, and we're down to 301 overall suspensions in the district this year. So I think that's a positive. Also looking at total out-of-school suspensions by ethnicity, race, you'll note the dark blue would be 2018 and 2019. Glad to report that in all areas except one, all of the groups of students except one, we saw pretty significant reductions in terms of the number of suspensions for our students by ethnicity year over year. Specifically, total out-of-school suspensions for Black students in 2018-19, from August to February, there were 98 suspensions of Black students. And from August to February of this school year, that number was reduced to 65. That is a reduction of 34%, so a third of the suspensions. We reduced that number by a third this year. And then finally, Dr. Haas set a goal earlier this year. Oh, no. Lost myself there. Dr. Haas set a goal this year, reduce suspension of Black students to 20% or fewer of the total out-of-school suspensions for the 2019-2020 school year. I am glad to report that we did have a significant reduction, as I showed before. Unfortunately, we did not quite make that 20% number. We did end up at 22%. So African-American or Black student suspensions came in at 22% of total suspensions this year. That's 2% lower than the year before, and relatively close to the goal that Dr. Haas set for us last year. That concludes my sharing. I'd be glad to answer any questions you all may have.
Nick, are most of the students that have out-of-school suspensions high school students?
You know, I did not pull that data. As a general rule, most of them tend to be secondary students. So mostly high school and secondary students in years past. I'd have to look specifically for this year, but yes, ma'am, as a general rule, that is what happens.
And in those schools that have the STEP program, which is redundant program, did we see a reduction in out-of-school suspensions there?
Absolutely. I think we shared some of that information earlier this year when we, at the early part of the budget process, when we were dreaming about expansion across the board of STEP. And I don't have those numbers with me, but I do know that we shared those with you, and some instances, those reductions are frankly jaw-dropping. Suspensions cut in half, significant reductions in those suspensions. Yes, ma'am.
I hate to see that program not being expanded.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but one of the things that I was talking with Matt before is we've had some schools who were not working on who did not have the program in place this year, who began some kind of footwork for how they would implement that program going into this year. And so we feel like there are going to be a few things that we can do that will help. Certainly, we would go full bore. But I think we're all excited that as we move into the next budget year, tomorrow, as Mr. Oberg said, hopefully the following year we'll be able to go back and move forward with that expansion to all schools. It really is a program that has a tremendous impact on students. And I always like to mention to folks that the surveys that we've done, in addition to just the overall reduction of the number of suspensions in the school, what's really important to remember about what happens with that program is that not only do students not out of, we see significant numbers of students walk into step and leave out of that program in a better position academically than they walk in, because they have the opportunity to do some focused catch-up work in that. So it is a really important piece for us going forward.
Hey, Nick, I just want to say that everybody on this board knows it. I am sure the employees of Albemarle County know it, but I want anybody who's streaming to listen. Albemarle County is extremely blessed to have you working with us. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Oberg. I appreciate that, sir. I can always count on you to look out for me.
I have
despite your football preferences.
I have a quick comment, which is going to be hard to follow because Nick, you are doing a great job. I think it's fantastic that our overall suspension numbers have gone down, but I do think it's worth noting that if you go a slide back from this one, or maybe 2 slides back, the ratios are actually, you can stay on the slide you're on. The ratios are in essence almost the same for Black students. Can you go back actually to the one we were just on? And it's actually increased for our Hispanic students, increased for our multiracial students. So if you actually look at our minorities, we've actually, since it's decreased for our white population, presumably it's overall increased for our minorities. And so I guess while still being very appreciative of the fact that we overall are suspending less students, which I think is important across the board, I am curious, given that we put a focus on getting rid of the disparity, the racial disparity, and perhaps it also falls along economic lines, I don't know, how are we going to address that in the future so it's changing? Because I would say the trend's actually the reverse of what we've wanted to happen in terms of the disparity in the ratio, even though the overall number is coming down.
Well, so the first thing I'd say is that, one of the things that we did this year that I think had a pretty significant impact on the reduction in terms of suspensions for Black students is the implementation of attendance out of school suspension case review protocol. We use that protocol exclusively for Black students this year, and administrators weren't required to do it for other students. Just today, I completed the revision of policy JGD, which is the board policy that regulates out of school suspension. And we actually wrote into that policy the use of that protocol for all suspensions beginning next year. And so I anticipate that as we continue to implement STEP across the division, and as we move forward with the superintendent's suspension review case review protocol, we will see suspensions continue to reduce and see them continue to reduce across all student groups. You know, one of the things that's important to think about, now, I talked with Dr. House about this the other day, or actually someone else. You know, the wonderful thing about that protocol is that what it does is that it reinforces for our administrators the notion that as a school division, we're going to support them when they decide to be creative about the way they respond to student behavior in ways that don't include out-of-school suspension. And so that is something that becomes particularly important and particularly useful. I can tell you that there are often times when, you know, I have conversations with the administrators who would like to not suspend the student, but are concerned that it's not going to be well received if they don't suspend the student for a specific incident. And what this protocol allows us to do is to help them get comfortable with the notion that they can actually safely keep students in school and make sure that everyone else around them is safe. And that once administrators get in that place, they are certainly less likely to impose suspensions and actually look for, you know, additional opportunities to reduce those suspensions. So I'm confident and optimistic that as we go forward with the use of that tool and the STEP tool, we'll continue to see significant reduction. So in a couple of weeks, you will receive that policy revision, and I trust that you all will approve it, and we'll be ready to implement that in the fall and hopefully begin to see additional reductions in our suspension rates.
So that I can better understand that. So you're saying a policy we had put in place last year to help eliminate the disparity, the proportional disparity of who we suspend was only implemented with our Black students. And that now it's implemented with Hispanic and multiracial, so that overall we're not disproportionately suspending minorities at a rate we don't approve of.
Right. I guess we would say we ran a pilot this year. It wasn't put in the policy this year. We ran a pilot with its use this year. So we used it as a practice this year. But in revising the policy that relates to suspensions, we have actually placed it in policy going for next year. So I think the response to your question is that that's correct.
And I would add that the goal that we set, that I put in front of the school board, because we knew as the overall suspension number was going to be reduced, it would make the percentage for minority students grow. So what we said, the whole goal is not there. In other words, we said that we were going to reduce the number of suspensions for Black students in particular by 20. And as of February, it was by 30. So because the overall number comes down, as you can see, the percentage doesn't go down as much as it could. And I like Ms. Carlson's question, because it really, the real work, so on one level I think we've done some heavy lifting, because we're trying to control the actual suspension decision of the administrator at the school. The deeper work is going to be drilling down and really be looking for patterns in teacher referrals and staff referrals, because the issue is once the referral is written and once the incident happens or it's interpreted as to happen, then the referral's written and then all of a sudden it lands in the principal's office, and then the principal has to do something with it. What we want to be able to do is to start looking for patterns in our teachers, in the numbers of referrals that they write, the numbers of referrals that they write disparately impacting minority students, and then working with those staff members with professional development so that they can become more culturally responsive and less punitive in their work with the students. And the piece that Nick talked about earlier, where he worked with Mark Leach to develop an electronic discipline referral, that's really the key, because we're developing dashboards now that'll be coming to the board pretty soon. Sarah Dusenberry's working on those. And right now we're still using suspensions as a climate aspect of the dashboard for a school. And again, that's after the referral's already written. And so there's that whole layer underneath it that we need to tap into and expose and put in front of the board and start to get strategic about how do we work with the classroom teachers.
Dr. Haas, thank you. And Dr. King, in the interest of time, we're going to have to move on. Thank you so much for your comments tonight. We look forward to the follow-up once the guidelines are, or once they're in development and when you've got some things to share with us. So thank you very, very much.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good night.
And you. Thank you.
Jono, you're muted.
Sorry, the last item on our agenda is the school board salary advertisement. And I just wanted to give a bit of a background on this, is that the school board has adopted the procedure currently used by the Board of Supervisors in setting its members' salary pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2-1414.3. Specifically, the school board will establish its members' salaries by affirmative vote between May 1st and June 30th annually. If the salary increase is approved by an affirmative vote, then the increase will take effect on July 1st. Currently, Albemarle County School Board members receive an annual salary of $6,907. The current chair stipend is an additional $1,800 annually, and the vice chair receives a stipend of $35 per meeting chaired. The Board of Supervisors also pays its chair a stipend of $1,800 annually, and the vice chair a stipend of $35 per meeting shared. Typically, the school board increases its salary by the same increase provided to classified staff. If the board follows the same increase as classified, then the salary beginning July 1st, 2020 would remain at $6,097. Before discussion, may I please have a motion to direct the board clerk to advertise for public hearing a school board member's salary of $6,907 with a chair stipend of $1,800 and a vice chair stipend of $35 per meeting shared.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would just add in the advertisement of the public meeting that we're proposing no change.
Correct. Correct.
I just think it's funny that Graham gets 35.
I do.
You think it's funny what, Dave?
That Graham gets $35 if he takes over.
Oh, I get that. I get that feeling. I understand. I've been there. So, okay.
Got it once.
Yeah. Ms. Johnston.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes.
Mr. Alcarro.
Unmute.
If he's not, if he,
I was pushing that middle
Graham
bar.
gets the $35.
I was missing pushing that middle
Take
bar.
the gavel.
Yes. Yes. The
Yeah,
motion
we'll
passes.
$5 for that time break.
There you go. Okay, the motion passes. Is there any other superintendent or school board member business before we adjourn? Okay, I'll take that as a no. As of right now, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys. Be well.
Bye now.
Thank you, Dave, for this